Hello, everyone, and welcome to SAP Industries Live, Leading with Innovation, an ongoing series exploring how more than 20 industries are adapting and transforming to meet the extraordinary changes happening in the world today. My name is Bob Evans, and I'm thrilled to be the moderator for this SAP Industries Live series. Today's virtual event will focus on the life sciences industry and the remarkable work that stakeholders there are doing to help optimize their clinical trial supply chains. We have three terrific speakers who are going to drive this conversation. From the customer side, David Volk is Senior Director for Clinical Supply at Roche, one of the world's leading pharmaceutical companies. From SAP, Mandar Paralkar is Head of the Life Sciences Business Unit. And on the partner side, Michael Schmidt is co-founder of Tenthpin Management Consultants. While every industry has been rocked over the past year by momentous changes, life sciences faces some specific challenges of its own, and those are going to form the heart of our conversation today. Quickly, a few of the topics we'll try to touch on here: collaboration across multiple stakeholders, the need to define standards to accelerate innovation, the use of industry-specific applications to help drive high-value co-creation, building cultures of openness and innovation, and then creating a single industry consortium to accelerate the time to value. So David, you're the customer here. You've been at the center of a lot of this change here. Give us a little bit of perspective on where Roche stands today in its journey toward clinical trial supply chain optimization.
Thanks, Bob. That's a lot of topics. That's interesting. I hope we can cover them all. So let me give you a bit of context and history. So when we talk about pharma, biotech, R&D supply chain, let's start with the R&D side. So I think we've all gotten some increasing awareness over the last year, and it's been really interesting to see this in the press and the news. Not only the value of pharma that we can bring to global health, but also the elements of supply chain. And it used to be when I would talk to colleagues and I would try to describe what I do, there were blank looks, and people wouldn't quite understand it. It's because we were kind of the back office, right? And we even sort of, if you go back years, we treated it this way in a little bit. Our job was just to make sure the product was there, and it was there at all times, and it was like a pharmacy model, right? So we focused on the science. We focused on essentially being project managers to get the material there, and the mantra was material should be there at all cost, no matter what, because what's most important is that there's a patient waiting. There's a patient who has a serious medical issue, and they're waiting for our product. And what's been really interesting over the last 10 years is seeing the maturity on this, as we've said, yes, and how can we do this even better? And how can we start applying things like the professional field of supply chain to optimize this area? And many of the companies have focused on building our internal systems, IT systems, professional expertise, and we've gotten a lot better at it, but we've done it all together, let's say individually. So our company's partnered with Michael and his colleagues over many years to develop solutions specific to our company that allow us to optimize within our four walls, you could say. So now I think our opportunity, and where we're all really excited, and this is such a fun time right now, is for us all to come together and say, how can we share these best practices? How can we all agree on some common standards and realize that we're not in it for any individual company here. We're in it to ensure the collective value of global health. And that's our mission. That's why we all show up to work every day. And so that's the exciting part about this.
So David, that ability for a set of companies working together in sort of close harmony to be able to do more together than each could individually, or even they all could do working individually.
Yeah, that's the point. So we've gone from a model, and I'll try to avoid getting too technical in the supply chain elements here, but we've gone from a model where we say we're a manufacturing organization or a supply organization, we're a supply network, and we have to work with a lot of other companies. Product, information systems is all flowing back and forth. And right now, that exchange model is extremely difficult. It's cumbersome. There's a lot of email, there are a lot of spreadsheets, it's all custom. We have to talk about common, definitions. What do you mean when you say this? It's a information heavy exchange. And so the value of us all coming together and collaborating is we can streamline that exchange model. And we can say, we're going to agree on some standard definitions. We're going to agree on what the data means. And we're all going to work together in a common platform, common way. And I think as I've talked to my colleagues at other companies, everyone really sees the value of this. They're excited about it, and they realize how much more we could do together.
Yeah, David, thanks. That's it's a fascinating perspective, and especially when you talk about that's why we come to work every day. This is not punching the clock, coming in and out. You guys are it's changing the world.
That's the hope. Yeah, in our small way every day, right?
Yeah. So Mandar, as head of the life sciences business at SAP, you get to talk to lots of customers, partners, stakeholders around the world. Are some of the topics that David just described, are those things that you're hearing fairly frequently?
Absolutely. When we talk to the pharma, biotech, med device companies, there are a lot of new business models coming up in every segment. And it's important that SAP traditionally has been in the supply chain manufacturing areas in life sciences, procurement, order to cash, procure to pay. Now we need to expand outside the comfort zone into areas like R&D and customer side. And to meet these new business models, we need to learn from the customers, and co-innovation is the best way, how we work in a consortium mode. So great to work with Roche and Tenthpin together in order to understand these industry requirements and then see how we can help the customers. When it comes to future business models, we see collaboration playing a big part. So it's not just the specific small scope you are focusing to develop. It's broader than that, how we can help the industry. And it takes into account technology, the new advancements, and also expanding the business process into R&D areas. So that's a key for us going forward.
Mandar, could I ask you, please, just expand a little bit on your point there about co-innovation. We hear a lot about that today. What does that mean in the life sciences industry?
That's a great question. We have an industry strategy around industry cloud where SAP has a corporate business technology platform. It helps to take the foundation and then build the business processes where SAP and partners come together to give applications that help our customers. And networks is on top where you can collaborate and communicate. So it's an industry cloud strategy that can help to meet these new business models. And that's the key for collaboration through these consortiums. So we see going forward, more such opportunities. We can work with additional partner ecosystem and customers to tap into how we expand and build the bridge between R&D and commercial. It can be areas like tech transfer. It can be areas around newer cell gene topics. So it's important to have foundation right with this success that we are seeing now with clinical trial supply management, and how we can build on top of that. That will be the key for the growth of the industry.
And maybe I'll add to Mandar, so if you don't mind. I've seen this also within Roche. So we started with this co-innovation topic in CTSM. And now I'm losing track of the number of times I hear on a daily basis the other kind of business areas that are saying that we have co-innovation opportunities with SAP to develop new solutions, the things that have pained us for many years. And so there's a lot of excitement around this approach. And it's especially exciting to see this be an industry trend, also with SAP supporting this concept of co-innovation.
Well, David, right there, I think you hit on that. One of the points that we wanted to get to, establishing this culture of more openness, more innovation. And it seems like if you have the openness, it sort of kicks open the opportunity for more of that innovation to happen.
Yeah, I mean, there's something where you say there's a great story here and it becomes a bit contagious and people get excited about it and they see what can be done and they follow on and say, where else can we apply this? Which is, I think, very common in innovation, especially process innovation areas.
Great. So, Michael, you were intimately involved in helping, to form the idea of the industry consortium and then get it moving. What are the advantages that sort of approach has brought to innovation in the life sciences field?
Yeah, I believe David already made the case clear, right? He's talking about excitement. He's talking about collaborating within the industry. I'm actively involved in the acquisition of new participants. They all ask that question, right? Why should we be there? Because there are so many industry-wide consortiums, working groups, opportunities where you can have a peer exchange in like a competitive free environment. Why should we join now this consortium, right? And what I tell them is the main difference here, we are going to conclude our journey with a new industry standard, with a product, with a technology platform that is going to enable the whole industry to step up to the next level. And this is not only about discussions about a simple process and then, you go back and you implement it individually again in your company. This is really something we are doing together. And the beauty of the consortium is we are doing the development in parallel, right? So the participants, they have a look and feel, and they can really see and feel the progress on a weekly and on a monthly basis. And they obviously can actively influence the design of the standard and also the solution and also the user experience. I believe another advantage the companies see at the moment is also that we did bring external supply chain partners on board. So we also have IoT vendors. We did open up the consortium to contract manufacturing and contract packaging organizations, which really ensures and allows us to have an end-to-end, a really truly integrated process view. And last but not least, I believe that given that we are using cloud technology, the consortium allows for participants to ask questions about what is the power of cloud, what are the advantages, what is the flexibility it really brings to the industry. Because cloud and life science industry, I don't see it there yet. From a compliance validation perspective, patient data, there are so many questions that companies are asking themselves, and we do have very good answers. And last but not least, I think it provides a good opportunity also for customers to see the new way how SAP is working. It's design-led development. It's all based on design thinking. It's agile. It's very interactive, very much focused on the user experience. And I really believe it provides the participants with excellent insights into what SAP is able to deliver these days.
Great, Mike.
So,
please.
If you don't mind, Michael, and maybe in the way Mandar, just to highlight your point around the cloud, I fully agree about the life sciences industry adoption of cloud. You might remember, we had conversations several years back around whether this could be a cloud solution, and I think our initial answer was no.
Right.
I think we were convinced otherwise. But I'm curious from your perspective, what does that enable in terms of the reach of this technology to especially smaller mid-sized companies that might not be able to, let's say, justify always the investment of really large, complex enterprise-wide solutions? How does this help in this space?
The way I look at it is more of a modular and flexible architecture that we have, so that consumption can be dependent on the size, what they want to pick and choose. We see in the new business models around how companies want to adapt for certain specific areas. It can be just to get packaging aspect, or it can be only on the labeling front, as an example. Those areas will be helpful for those mid-sized companies who add value. If it is an EDC or an IRT vendor, their scope might be different. So the more we can compartmentalize the cloud and ensure that their data is safe and in a private environment, it will help us to really scale this model in due course of time.
Yeah, thanks. I hope you don't mind me interrupting there, Bob. It's something, kind of a point I want to link to, because one of the interesting things about this consortium and this model of co-innovation we're building is that historically, this has all kind of made sense for the large pharma companies. But the huge amount of R&D and investment in new technologies is coming in the smaller mid-sized companies. And so, for me, the fascinating thing is how do we reach out and have the whole industry engaged?
Yeah, David, I think that's a terrific point. And, the pace of these changes is accelerating to such a degree. So I'm not sure what that was. It's great to grab these wonderful ideas coming from all different directions. So mid-sized companies and so forth. If you lower the barriers to entry for those folks, it seems then everybody's going to benefit from this. So I also just wanted to mention here to you folks in the audience, we've got 3 of the world's experts in these areas here. So please, share some of your comments and questions. We've had someone mention that the pharma industry is making the world better and safer. And this idea about convergence, helping to drive R&D more rapidly. Very, very true. So David, on that subject, armed with these new capabilities, I know this is a broad question, but you are so good at answering broad questions. What's Roche able to do today that it couldn't do before?
Sure. How long do I have? I'll try to be concise. So I usually, let me answer at a bit of a broader level, to your point, and a higher level. So the things that I try to have us pay attention to and care about are the high-level business outcomes. And here, there's three that I usually would like to highlight. One would be reliability. So reliability is core and critical to our field. And as I mentioned when I started, we have patients, and the patients need the medicine. And if we can't reliably supply, then we haven't done our core job. The second is, I'm going to call it speed and agility. So the rate at which we can get the product through and respond to changes in the environment. We have a huge amount of demand uncertainty. So we don't know where our patients will be at any given time. And in classic supply chain sense, we talk about forecast accuracy. Forecast accuracy is typically less than 50%, and that's even being kind. Mm-hmm. So we need to be able to be agile to respond to those changes and be ready and link it back to the reliability piece. And the third kind of leg of the balancing tool is the cost effectiveness. So I believe we have an obligation, and it's becoming increasingly important when we talk about R&D productivity and the cost of medicines to society. We have an obligation to be as cost effective as possible and return those savings to R&D and to innovation. The cost we're investing in this field is growing 10% a year, and has been for quite some time. That's quite a high rate given the maturity of our industry. And even we can link to the elements we see right now. Many of us are experiencing the vaccine supply chain, which I'm not personally involved with, but I know colleagues are, and I have a huge amount of respect and incredible admiration for the folks that people are doing here. This is a really complex and very expensive process, and with all the cold chain management. And so how do we try to make sure that we are as efficient as possibly can, as we need to be? We have an obligation to society. So those are the main business objectives of what we're looking for. Of course, I can get into specific technologies, right? If we're looking at using machine learning for improving our forecast accuracy, if we're looking at IoT technologies for cold chain management, those types of elements, I think, are the specific technology innovations that we're including here. But I really want to we should focus high level on the business outcomes.
Yeah. So Mandar, if I could, following on that, you've talked a lot about the co-innovation and co-creation with customers. David just highlighted some of these technological advantages, and you had mentioned the sort of the rise of SAP's industry cloud to bring to bear a lot of these precise industry-specific capabilities that go beyond, for a particular industry, what the traditional enterprise applications could offer. So how is that helping, drive these sort of high-level business goals that David just outlined?
So when you look at the industry, we need to definitely look at interoperable standards, look at how we communicate with different business partners in the value chain. So these critical aspects are possible through cloud-to-cloud integration, keeping the cost manageable. So the life sciences industry is comfortable traditionally with the shared services model for procurement or HR and sales side of the house. But when it comes to supply chain, slowly we are seeing traction around planning solutions. But when it comes to GXP, we need to be more careful of how the data is exchanged between the business partners. And the technology like cold chain, as David mentioned, there are a lot of sensor vendors which need to integrate that data, bring it back into cloud. So visibility and transparency is very important. And that can span across multiple projects that we have as a part of overall clinical supply. So it's important that how SAP operates with other players in the IT environment is also critical. We have definitely partnerships with bigger players when it comes to automation vendors, as an example. Those will definitely come in handy as we see the need and the fit for clinical trial scope going forward.
Michael, can I ask you to touch on that as well? And then also I want to come back and ask each of you about this notion that you've raised here, along with these sort of big sweeping moves for consortium changing the culture of companies, then you also have all each talked, quite compellingly about the need for a patient-centric philosophy. So Michael, how about if you jump on that?
Sure. So, I mean, patient centricity is the thing at the moment in the industry, right? I think it's especially coming because of all the new advanced therapies that we see luckily coming. If you look at the pipelines of all of the major and also the mid-sized pharma companies in the next 5 to 10 years, their portfolios are changing fundamentally towards personalized treatments. And researching and doing development of the product is the one thing, but getting that product to the patient is the other. And the industry for the last decades, they were producing in large batch sizes, right? And you had hardly any contact with the, I don't want to say end customer, but with the patient, right? Your distribution was to wholesalers. I remember like 10 years ago, we did a project direct to hospital. That was already a whole new thing, right? Instead of going to the wholesaler, you went to the hospital or you went direct to the pharmacy. But now we are talking about treatments that require the manufacturers to integrate the patient really as an active partner into the value chain, because you might even start with patient material, right? You might start with a blood sample, you might start with tumor material, you might start with body parameters of the patient that really drive your whole procurement, your planning process, your manufacturing, your distribution process. And doing that is extremely disruptive, and that really requires a whole new end-to-end capability that life science companies need to build up, supported by technologies, obviously. And this is not about, you have a new data set up or you implement this new process. No, this is a significant paradigm change that we experience these days in the industry. And I believe co-innovation kicks in here as well, because a co-innovation or an innovation for me is always, you come to the table, you try to solve a solution, and none of the participants can claim, I have done this before. Here is a template solution. I have seen this working somewhere else. No, if you have seen this working somewhere else, it's not an innovation any longer, right? So we need to actively identify these areas in the industry and tap into those and make use of the co-innovation capabilities that Mandar and David have described.
Yeah. Hey, David, with that, I think Michael brought up the notion of getting the patient involved somewhat in the supply chain, but it sort of is where demand and chain and supply chains meet, right? So you've got a lot on your plate already, being head of clinical supply, but it's got to be helpful to get that patient input into that loop, right?
Yes, absolutely. And honestly, I think we still do more as an industry in this area. And I would probably say many of us are very early at the stage of understanding what that means, and trying to make sure that we're truly connecting and understanding the patient perspective. So let's take an example. I have a friend who's CEO of a small biotech company, and he tells me he knows every one of his patients. He knows them by name. He knows the characteristics of them. That is patient centricity in my experience. And within large pharma, I think we have a long way to go, and it's a mindset shift, and we should try to adapt that mindset in many ways.
One comment I would add, Bob, to David's point, right? Traditionally, supply chain always that make to stock. We bulked it and then we shipped it out of the door. Now we see a lot of make to order, assemble to order. It's a change in manufacturing strategy. And not a whole lot of pharma companies are ready for that big change. So it's basically a supply chain of one. So you need to create different sorts of labeling, packaging. You need to take into account a lot of complexity. And just like analytics, traditionally it was just batch traceability. Now it's just batch for a specific patient. That means you need to identify that patient and then build a chain throughout your supply chain. And these new complexities need better sophisticated technology, whether it is looking at demand patterns through algorithms. So it's important to see how we adapt quickly to the new requests around the patient centricity.
And the downstream impacts, Mandar, to add on that, are also interesting. I mean, we have a customer now we are talking to, and they need to revisit their whole KPI framework. The way how they are running their supply chain, how they are managing risk alongside of the supply chain. the old or the current KPI framework is not helping them much. So this is where data analytics comes in, obviously.
Michael, let me come back to you on that as well, because right, you had talked about that thing, and Mandar just mentioned it, the batch manufacturing goes on a truck, gets sent over to a wholesaler, right? And then, the pharmaceutical companies who created these extraordinary medications, right? And in some ways they're cut off from visibility into where does that go? Who gets it next? What do they use? And it isn't like, you're talking about, just some sort of commodity product, some, metaphorical widget somewhere. These are life-enhancing, life-changing medications. So what does that mean then for the other players in the supply chain, especially as they can participate in the consortium here, rather than saying like, oh man, you're gonna cut me out of the loop here? How instead are they going to have advanced or enhanced opportunities to participate?
Yeah, I believe it's all about collaboration in the future, right? And if you look at in the last 12 months, what has happened in terms of collaboration in the life sciences industry caused by the pandemic is mind-blowing, right? I mean, you had R&D collaborations that started within a week and with nothing documented, right? We see faster product approvals than ever. We see amazing things. We see companies renting manufacturing capacities from their main competitors just to get the vaccines produced. There is so much happening. So to your question, it is all about collaboration, and it's really about end-to-end integration. If you look at a personalized treatment, I mean, you need to get the product to the patient. In the worst case, you really need to sync it with a chemotherapy, right? You need to be there on time. You cannot delay the delivery by 2 hours or so, right? And then you run into these specific challenges. The patient didn't show up because he didn't feel well, right? So what are you doing? I mean, these are all whole new supply chain challenges that the manufacturers have typically not met in the past.
And Michael, I would say, I mean, you talked about collaboration. You have played, and your team has played a particular important role in ensuring this collaboration. So ultimately, when we talk about collaboration across these companies, this is a relatively niche industry and small field. And, a lot of it comes down to these personal connections and the value, coming back to one of the early points, the value of, Michael and Tenthpin that they bring to this consortium is being able to bring in all these connections, these people who some of us have known one-on-one for years and years. I almost say we're old friends, right? When we get to see each other actually in person at a conference or whatnot. But bringing this group together and actually saying, okay, now how do we take that and how do we bring that together into a joint conversation and development conversation?
I want to share a comment from the audience. Jim mentions that cell gene therapy is where we're heading. Pharma and hospitals will be the next supply chain frontier. Any thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I think the growth in cell and gene therapy is incredible. And it's new, and we're all trying to figure it out in terms of how we want to do it. There's obviously some leaders in the space that have helped us, break ground initially. And we're all trying to learn from them and experience how we can do this better. But I think that we're going to see a lot of evolution in this space over the years. And there's going to be a convergence between the innovations we're seeing in cell and gene therapy and the traditional, let's say, make-to-stock supply chains. And how do we bring them together and learn from each other and treat it like a spectrum of different approaches so we can share best practices. So.
Yeah, Mandar, I wanted to ask you here, first a comment from the audience and then a question for you. Technology is bringing change so that supply chain KPIs now involve more about collaboration. Are you seeing some of this, Mandar? And can you describe a little bit? Because Michael touched on these shifting KPIs to match up to the new reality. What are you seeing?
Absolutely, that's a great point. Think about traditional supply chain, which was very linear in nature. But now what we learned from COVID is you need to be prepared for various discrepancies and volatile demand. So the key thing is in clinical trial supplies, right? We need to be prepared to do a direct-to-patient shipment to their house if they are not able to go to the hospital or a clinic for some reason. So it's important that these changes are putting additional pressure on the ecosystem, as well as the value chain needs to be prepared. If the one path is not possible, you need to have an alternate path, whether it is the discovering a supplier in the supply chain, or it is a different way to deliver a drug to the right location, right time, right place. And then the traditional score metrics or the KPIs which we had in supply chain needs to be adapted and adjusted. What we see in cold chain is like traditionally temperature was good for a lot of consumer product companies, but now time out of refrigeration is critical when you manufacture that drug on the shop floor. And then TOR is also maintained. You need to have a temperature monitoring throughout the supply chain. So there is a lot of places where technology can play a big role. And the key thing is collaboration between value chain entities. But just a quick last comment on this topic is what is satisfying with this consortiums is when we get the customer feedback directly in small agile scrums, it's good for the development team to know that they are in the right direction, right path, and get that satisfaction when the end user gives them okay. So it's good to move to the next stage. So even if we get new requirements like an adaptive trial or something in virtual you need to manage, that's easily possible to incorporate because there are shorter scrums. So that's the beauty of the new technology advancements, how the products are developed to meet the new needs of the customers and new business models.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, Michael, could I ask you, and then maybe David, if you have a thought on this as well. Michael, I loved your comment. You said, the changes and the pace of change in the last 12 months has been mind-blowing. I don't know. It just seems like these days, that once, something like this achieves a certain speed, it doesn't generally tend to slow down. So do you think, will the next 12 months bring similarly, jarring change to this life sciences industry? And if so, how then should companies be prepared to deal with this rolling series of disruptions?
Well, I think we need to wait until the dust has really settled, right? And I don't think that the industry will keep up with that speed. The speed might not necessarily be regulated by the manufacturers, but by the regulatory bodies, right? And they already were struggling to keep up with the speed in the last 12 months. It will be interesting to see what the impacts are on that front. And their speed might really help to determine what the speed for the industry is going to be in the future. Because, from my perspective, we are at a point where technology is no longer a limitation, where the industry has shown that whole new different collaboration models are possible. And the one thing that might slow down most of these ventures is really the regulatory side of things. So my personal hope is that the regulatory side of things is going to keep up with the speed at which we see the industry changing at the moment.
David, do you have a thought on that?
I would share a story maybe on this that I saw this past year. So within Roche, we saw a signal in R&D that maybe one of our products could have a value and life-saving value for COVID. And we reacted incredibly quickly. And so when it came to us and we said, okay, how do we supply this clinical trial, which we want to start basically as soon as you can get product through the investigator site. We saw people coming in, right, within a 24-hour notice. It was ready to get packaged up, labeled, prepared. That 24 hours spanned from a Friday afternoon in Switzerland through to Saturday. And then the product was palletized and on a plane coming to the United States. It was coming into my facility in the United States. And I was thinking, okay, great. Now we've got to get FDA approval. We've got to get customs clearance. This will take a few days like it normally does. And, we get notice as the truck is getting trucked up on a Sunday evening from LA to San Francisco that all of a sudden the clearance has already been completed and we're ready to go. This is mind blowing in terms of speed, in terms of every individual area in the supply chain, all the people that are involved, the heroics that it takes to get this product through and to the patients was amazing. Now, is that sustainable every single day? Not the way we did it. So how do we take those lessons that we learned, that incredible experience and just dedication and the ability to cut through, non-value added processing, waiting time, all of these different steps, and say, how can we make this the everyday occurrence? That's our challenge for an industry.
Yeah, that sounds like a great challenge, David. Pretty exciting. Can I ask, I just want to thought, someone in the audience, Dipali asked, how are we planning to use AI as the process evolves in the future? Any thoughts on that?
I can take a stab, but Mandar or Michael, do you want to? You all might have a broader view.
Certainly. From a technology perspective, a lot of the engines are a part of our business technology platform, which is a part of industry cloud strategy. So partners can use some of those adapters and APIs to see the power of what machine learning algorithms we have. We also offer tools like process automation that can also augment the process. But the key thing is to identify a business process where you want to adapt it. And you need the big data to associate with it, because over a period of time, you need to capture demand patterns in order to process and then synthesize to see the outcome that can impact the decisions. So technology is definitely available from SAP. We look forward for customers like Roche and others to help us identify those business areas that we can address as a part of these consortiums and co-innovation activities. David?
Yeah, Michael, do you want to start? Maybe I'll see your perspective, and then I can.
Yeah. Just to add on what Mandar said, technology is not a limitation. That's I keep repeating that message, and there is obviously a lot of excitement about AI in general at the moment in the industry, and we have seen cases where we were able to acquire additional insights and intelligence from new data that we looked at. And the customer would come back and say, oh, this is AI. No, it was not AI. It was just using the intelligence that you can acquire from big data analytics, right? So I believe, especially in the clinical trial supply space, it will be a lot about predictive analytics. So it's really about predictions and scenario planning and what-if scenarios. There are a lot of application scenarios I can think of for machine learning, like Mandar said. At the end, it's really about getting the data and talking about a full integrated end-to-end value chain. You often rely on data from external partners. So that could be one of the major topics for the next couple of years. How do you build one, I call it now a data lake, where you also get access to the partner data, right? Because that's a major challenge today. David.
Yeah, I like your framework. I like how you talked about it. Similarly, so I'm certainly not a technology expert in this space. I think I definitely rely on others on my team to be much more experts than I am. But let's say, speaking from a novice's perspective, I see it as the evolution we have to go through from data analytics, advanced data analytics, machine learning into AI, and this will be a maturing process that we go through over time. The near-term opportunities we see are definitely around the ability to be more predictive in our forecasting. How do we take advantage of the vast troves of data that we have from not just our own within Roche clinical trials, but ideally from the broader industry to be able to predict when we'll have patients, when their patient need will be. And that'll allow us to have much better accuracy, kind of tying back to some of the things I mentioned earlier on the broadcast. And then how do we take it to the next step of doing more of an autonomous and self-driving supply chain, so that we're using the machine learning AI technologies and capabilities to truly orchestrate our end-to-end activities. Many of the areas where we have, individuals often having to play this role of sometimes this very cumbersome intervention process and oversight in our supply chain. And how do we get it to be much more automated, streamlined, and let's say give up control and letting the systems do the technology for us, do the processes for us.
Well, gentlemen, I think we've tapped it through all of our questions from the audience, and I think each of you has made some, terrific points on this. I want to go around and see if you each would like to offer a concluding thought. Michael?
Well, the conclusion for me is, if you have not joined our consortium yet, do it now. It's a perfect opportunity. It's perfect timing. I believe we did talk about the advantages, and we did outline also what really the benefits are. It is all about collaboration. And if you join the consortium and the discussions, you can really help creating a new industry standard. So join.
Yeah. Mandar?
We have been working on this for the last couple of months, and it's been an exciting journey. So thanks, David and Michael, about it. We definitely want to take it to the next level, how to collaborate with players from different industries if needed. We've seen in COVID situation, automotive suppliers also helping med device companies as an example. So we will see how to expand the scope beyond just the life sciences if need be. But it's important to see that this is the future of how SAP is collaborating in the partner ecosystem, working with customers. So I see many more consortiums for different topics, because time is of the essence and we need to deliver IT solutions to our customers at a faster pace. So it will be interesting to see how we can work together with customers and partners going forward.
David?
So maybe I'll steal the opportunity to say 2 points. One is similarly to Michael. So for all the colleagues out there in the industry, we hope you'll join us in this consortium. I think it's a unique opportunity to bring us all together and to see how we can collectively add value in this space. And then the second piece I just want to conclude with is a sincere appreciation to everyone involved in this. So there are, the 4 of us here talking and sharing our experiences. But beyond that, within Roche, Tenthpin, and SAP, it's incredible contributions. And none of this would be possible without the amazing expertise that has been developed over many, many years, the great working relationships, and the long hours and hard work to bring the solution forward. So really strong appreciation to the great experts within our teams who are delivering this solution.
David, Mandar, Michael, thank you all for your excellent insights and perspectives on this remarkable set of innovations taking place here. It was so intriguing to hear you talk about, there's in some ways like the industrial side that's existed for a while, but the connections you're making, that patient-centric approach, the philosophy, the opportunities, breaking down some of the walls to work together in the consortium. It sounds like there are only going to be more exciting things, David, more of those, breathtaking achievements like you mentioned coming along here as well. So thank you all for being with us. And to all of you in the audience, thank you very much for joining this session of SAP Industries Live to see what's going on in the life sciences industry. We hope you'll check out more information on the LinkedIn Live page here to get more details. And on behalf of the SAP Life Sciences team, thanks very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.